Well, so, you kind of touched on this, but how about the number of vendors to kind of, you mentioned, your EMR accomplishes something in revenue cycle, but how many kind of vendors do you work with, kind of split among these categories?
Yeah. In most cases, our EMR vendor and our core patient accounting system vendor is the same. So that's typically one at a hospital. Again, we run multiple EMRs, so you can multiply. There's a whole bunch of revenue cycle bolt-ons, things like claim scrubbers and CDIS systems and form vendors and all kinds of stuff. So there's it could easily be for a single hospital. If I just took revenue cycle, you could be looking at 15 to 20 vendors pretty easily by the time you bolt things around it. The EMR is typically going to be one vendor, or at least we try very hard. We don't run a lot of best of breed stuff, so you won't find a carve out ED system. Typically, there's a couple exceptions. We don't have a third party OR system, so we tend to be pretty straightforward on the EMR side, being the core clinicals. In the ancillary or wraparounds, that's where you could get quite a bit. And that's probably where I see the biggest penetration with new vendors popping up going, hey, take a look at this, take a look at that. They're niche things the EMR vendors just aren't very good at for whatever reason. So there could be quite a few there. Supply chain, typically you run one system, but you may have some bolt-ons there, analytics. You might have, your EDI vendor, et cetera. So I don't know if I'm answering your question. It's hard to come up with kind of an exact number.
Yeah, okay. No, you absolutely are. And thank you for that. So curious, why do you think there are these add-ons? So you mentioned, let's just take the example of your EMR and core patient accounting system. You mentioned them being one system, but then there's a whole bunch of add-ons like Claim Scrubber, CDIS, and all. Why is there a market for these add-ons? Why is it not kind of,
Yeah, two things. One is, EMR vendors, let's just take EMR vendors for a second. They typically are good at certain things, but they don't purport to be everything to everybody. I think over time they try to take on more things. Here's a good example. So historically, the Cerners and the Epics and the Meditechs did not have an OB system. And the reason they didn't is because you had to be FDA regulated, and they didn't want to get in that space. So when you get into fetal strip monitoring, that's regulated by the FDA government. It becomes a little more laborious and painful and a higher investment in R&D. So they just said, we're out. I'm not going to do it. They historically didn't have PAC systems because it was just a different technology. They didn't have people in it. Other people did it, and they just left it alone. So I think you're going to find one of two things. One is I never invested in that area, or number two is they partnered with somebody and they're comfortable with that, and they just don't feel the need to displace a partner. Now, like Cerner will rebrand a PAC system. They'll sell it as theirs. It's really not theirs. They rebrand it from somebody else. So sometimes they're just comfortable with that, and they say, look, we'll spend our R&D dollars somewhere else. So, so yeah, that's one dynamic. The other thing you got going on is people that are out there seeing a need and filling it with more creative solutions, and they're smaller, nimbler organizations, and they continue to innovate faster than the EMR vendors. So that would be the other reason you would see something pop up.
In your opinion, where do you think this is all going? So the EMRs right now, it sounds like, they're adding in things to their, they're actually taking in the bolt-ons and rebranding them as their own and whatever. Is that a trend towards sort of the EMR being the one-stop shop for all of the hospital's IT needs? I mean, is that going to happen? Is that realistic?
I do think it's realistic. I don't know if it'll ever get to the point where you only have one vendor. I think there's always going to be people out there that just come up with a cool idea and innovate faster than the EMR vendors. So I don't think it will ever get to the point where it's pure 100%. I only work with one vendor. At least I've never been anywhere close. I do think I'm a lot closer to that because of meaningful use than I've ever been. So I've worked at places where we ran one vendor for radiology system. We ran another one for PACS. We ran a third one for the laboratory, but we had a fourth one for pathology. And I think through MU and a lot of